By the year 1820, an increasing number of early Americans were pressing westward, drawn to the new discoveries and opportunities that lied within the vast boundaries of the Louisiana Territory. Desiring more farmland, thousands of people had settled as far west as the Mississippi River, creating numerous new settlements and states in the process. The first region that was heavily settled west of the original 13 states was the Appalachian Mountain region, including Tennessee and Kentucky. Unlike other parts of the United States, the Appalachian region was largely populated by Scottish and Irish immigrants. The Old Northwest referred to parts of modern-day Midwest, including the states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. This region of the country was settled heavily between 1800 and 1820. Most of the early settlers were from many different parts of the country. Ohio was largely populated by migrants from New England, and most of the state was settled by 1820. Some migrants also came from the southern states to Indiana, which was mostly settled by migrants from North Carolina and Virginia. Illinois settlers were more diverse, coming from New England, the South, and Appalachia regions. For decades, early Americans blazed trails from the eastern settlements of the United States westward, extending deeper into the interior of the continent. Many of these trails-turned-roads were nothing more than ancient Indian trails, now claimed by the ever-increasing population of European immigrants. The Wilderness Road was one of two principal routes used by colonial and early National-era settlers like Daniel Boone to reach Kentucky from the east. Though this road goes through the Cumberland Gap near the southern Kentucky and northern Tennessee borders, the other, more northern route was sometimes called the Cumberland Road because it started in Fort Cumberland, Maryland. The northern route was later selected for the National Road, which extended from near Washington, Pennsylvania, into the Ohio River Valley of northern Kentucky. The Wilderness Road was steep, rough, and narrow, and could be traversed only on foot or horseback. By contrast, and after many improvements, wagons could travel along the National Road, originally the Braddock Road, blazed by the competing Ohio Company and George Washington in the 1750s. In addition to the wilderness and national roads, there were other commonly traveled routes extending from various parts of the eastern states into the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys. Zane's Trace and the Maysville Road connected Pittsburgh to Louisville, Kentucky, and the Great Valley and Nashville roads stretched between Philadelphia and Nashville, Tennessee. Before the first European immigrants ever set foot on this continent, generations upon generations of Native American Indians discovered, blazed, and traversed these paths through the wilderness, forever laying claim as the original trailblazers. By 1820, they were being displaced and forced farther westward in advance of the migrating European settlers. When Columbus arrived in 1492, the entire continent was inhabited by various indigenous Native American Indians, each tribe defined by their unique language, culture, and customs. By 1790, These people were being forced inland, off their ancestral lands in the east and northeast, by the increasing arrival of European immigrants. By 1820, the expanding boundaries of the United States had reached the Mississippi River Valley, forcing many disparate Native American Indian tribes into closer proximity, causing competition for natural resources and resulting in intertribal conflicts. From Studio 37, welcome to the Mann and Perrin families of Western Iowa YouTube channel. I'm your host, writer and producer, Brian Mann, and this is Episode 4, 1820 to 1830. This is the fourth episode of an 11-part video series about the Mann and Perrin families who settled in the Luss Hills of Western Iowa in the mid-1800s. Hello. It seems that in spite of best intentions, cranking out a new episode every 2 weeks was perhaps a slight miscalculation. When Elena and I started out, we weren't really sure how much time and how many hours it would take to put together an episode. With all certainty, we can now say more than we had imagined. But we are no less committed to completing every episode in this Ancestry video series. We trust that your patience and interest is not waning and that you have enough reserves in your tanks to stick with us. Because we're in this for the long haul, and we hope you are as well. One of the driving factors that compelled my ancestors to migrate west in the mid-1800s was a common association with a newly formed American-made religion originally named the Church of Christ, later called the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and is known today as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. Several foundational events leading to the formation of the Mormon Church took place in the 1820s. We felt it was important to include those events in this episode for our present-day relatives in hopes they might, perhaps, gain a deeper understanding from future episodes into what attracted our ancestors to this newly formed Mormon religion and what ultimately drew them farther westward. In the spring of 1820, Joseph Smith, Jr., the founder of Mormonism, claimed to have been visited by God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, in answer to a prayer about which church was the true church. 3 years later, in September 1823, Joseph claimed to have been visited by the angel Moroni, who informed Joseph that an ancient record of golden plates, accompanied by seer stones, was buried on a hill near Manchester, New York. 4 years later, in September 1827, Joseph claimed the angel Moroni appeared to him again and permitted him to take possession of the golden plates. The plates were purported to be an ancient Egyptian written account of the former inhabitants of this continent and the sources from which they sprang, and contained the fullness of the everlasting gospel as delivered by the Savior to the ancient inhabitants. Joseph claimed that he and he alone was charged by the angel Moroni to translate the golden plates which became the foundation of the Book of Mormon. There's compelling evidence, which we will share in upcoming episodes, that my ancestors believed these events to be true and divine. Whether or not there is any basis of fact and truth in Joseph Smith's claims, I leave to you to conclude. Now, let's get into Episode 4, 1820 to 1830. On March 3, 1820, the Missouri Compromise Bill, sponsored by Henry Clay, was passed in the United States Congress. This legislation allowed slavery in the Missouri Territory, but not in any other location west of the Mississippi River that was north of the 36 degrees 30 minutes latitude, the current southern borderline of the state of Missouri. In early 1820, during the midst of the Second Great Awakening, Joseph Smith, Jr. was living on his father's farm near Palmyra, New York. At the time, traditional and newly formed churches in the region contended so vigorously for souls that western New York became known as the Burned-Over District, because the fires of religious revivals had burned over it so often. Western New York was also noted for its obsession with Indian mounds and participation in a craze for treasure hunting. In the early 1820s, Joseph was periodically hired as a scryer, using what were termed seer stones in attempts to locate lost items and buried treasure. Those that knew Smith described his method for seeking treasure as putting the stones in a white stovepipe hat, putting his face over the hat opening to block the light, and then seeing information in the reflections of the stones. It was a well-known fact that Joseph Smith Jr., at an early age, possessed a vivid and unbridled imagination. Perhaps conditions were replete back then with all the necessary ingredients for the divine visions that Joseph claimed to have witnessed during the 1820s. On March 26, 1820, at 14 years of age, Joseph Smith Jr. claimed to have seen a vision, or theophany, a visible manifestation to humankind of God, or a God. Joseph claimed he had been concerned about what denomination to join and prayed in the nearby woods, later called the Sacred Grove by his followers. There he said he had a vision in which he saw God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, as two separate, glorious, resurrected beings of flesh and bone. As Joseph claimed, they told him that no contemporary church was correct in its teachings and that he should join none of them.
By midsummer in 1820, there were 9,638,453 people living in the United States, an increase of 33% since 1810. The most populated state at that time was New York, with 1,372,812 residents, and the population center of the United States lied just 16 miles east of Moorefield, West Virginia. On the 1820 census conducted in Hebron County, New York, my fourth great-grandfather, Ephraim Perrin, is listed as the head of his family. Counts for Ephraim and my fourth great-grandmother, Hannah, are shown under the 26 to 45 age range for both free white males and females, respectively. There are 2 free white males under the age of 10 noted. These are my third great-grandfather, Charles Chauncey Perrin, and his younger brother, Martin. There are also 2 free white males shown under the 10 to 16 age range. These counts are for Nathan and Armin. Under the free white female age groups, there is 1 female child listed under the 10 to 16 age range. This count is for Eliza. We believe this census shows evidence of the human factor. Under the 10 and under age group for free white females, it appears that the number 11 has been recorded. We believe, instead of writing the number 2, that the census author chose to use tick marks to indicate that there were 2 free white females under the age 10 living in the household at the time. Based on known birth dates, we believe that these 2 children are Martha, who was born on September 1st, 1817, and Sarah Ann, who was born on March 19, 1819.
By 1820, my third great-grandparents, Nathaniel and Mary Mann, were living in the Deerfield Township in Tioga County, Pennsylvania. On the 1820 census, both Nathaniel and Mary are counted under the 45 and older age groups for both free white males and females, respectively. The age groups on the 1820 census had changed from those used in 1810. The 26 to 44 and 44 and over age ranges were changed to 26 to 45 and 45 and over. Also, for free white males only, the 16 to 25 age range from the 1810 census was broken into 2 overlapping age ranges, 16 to 18 for single males and 16 to 26 for married males, heads of families. On the 1820 Deerfield Census, My second great-grandfather, Richard Montgomery Mann, 17 at the time, is counted under the 16 to 18 age range, and his older brother, John Mann, who was 19, is counted under the 16 to 26 age range. From November 1st to December 6, 1820, the election of James Monroe to a second term in office came after a landslide victory in the Electoral College, with Monroe defeating John Quincy Adams by a tally of 231 votes to 1. On July 10, 1821, the United States took possession of the territory of Florida after its purchase is completed with Spain. No money exchanged hands between Spain and the U.S. The United States had agreed to pay $5 million to citizens for property damage resulting from the Seminole Wars. On November 16, 1821, the first legal international trade on the Santa Fe Trail began after William Becknell, a Missouri trader, met with then Facundo Melgares, the Spanish governor of New Mexico. The huge profit earned convinced Becknell that he should return over the trail route the following year. On February 13, 1822, advertisements placed by General William Henry Ashley and Major Andrew Henry appeared in Missouri newspapers, calling for a corps of 100 men to ascend the River Missouri as part of a fur trading venture. Many of the men who later earned reputations as famous mountain men joined the enterprise, including James Beckwourth, David Jackson, William Sublette, Jedediah Smith, Jim Bridger, Thomas Fitzpatrick, and James Clyman. These men and others would later be known as Ashley's 100. On March 30, 1822, Florida becomes an official territory of the United States. We have been unable to determine the exact date, but it is believed that in the early months of 1822, John Mann, my second great-grandfather's older brother, married Eunice Bennett. If you've been following along during previous episodes, you might recall that my third great-grandmother's maiden name is Mary Eunice Bennett, mother to my second great-grandfather, Richard Montgomery Mann, and his older brother John. So, here's where things get a bit twisted, so stay with me. The headline to this story is, John Mann married his first cousin. Eunice Bennett is the niece of Mary Eunice Bennett. Mary's brother, John T. Bennett, and his wife, Mary Slafter, are Eunice Bennett's parents. I trust this diagram is helping you with connecting the dots, but John T. Bennett and Mary Slafter also had another daughter named Delana, and we'll be making a connection to her a bit later. On May 6, 1822, a law prohibiting the sale of alcohol to Indians was passed, which caused disruption in the fur trade pattern that relied on the Indians to trap and hunt for the furs in exchange for alcohol and other goods. On April 25, 1823, the War Department ordered an expedition under the command of Stephen Long up the Red River and along the 49th parallel, which marked the official border between the United States and Canada.
We're not certain of the exact date, but sometime in 1823, my fourth great-grandmother, Hannah L. Draper, wife of Ephraim Perrin, passed away at the age of 38. Hannah is the mother of my third great-grandfather, Charles Chauncey Perrin.
In early June 1823, Hugh Glass, another notorious mountain man, joined Ashley's 100 just before departing on their fur trading expedition up the Missouri River. They later met up with many of the men that had joined up in 1822 and were attacked by Arikara warriors. Glass was shot in the leg, and the survivors retreated downstream and sent for help. Glass wrote a letter to the parents of John S. Gardner, who was killed on June 2, 1823. It reads, "Dear Sir, my painful duty it is to tell you of the death of your son, who befell at the hands of the Indians, 2nd June, in the early morning. He died a little while after he was shot, and asked me to inform you of his sad fate. We brought him to the ship when he soon died. Mr. Smith, a young man of our company, made a powerful prayer who moved us all greatly, and I am persuaded John died in peace. His body we buried with others near this camp and marked a grave with a log. His things we will send to you. The savages are greatly treacherous. We traded with them as friends, but after a great storm of rain and thunder, they came at us before light, and many were hurt. I myself was shot in the leg. Master Ashley is bound to stay in these parts till the traitors are rightly punished. Your obedient servant, Hugh Glass. On August 9th, 1823, the Arikara Indian War officially began as the U.S. Army engaged in the first conflict with an Indian tribe in the Western Territories after the warriors had attacked Ashley's fur trading expedition in June. In the late hours of September 21st, 1823, and early hours on the 22nd, Joseph Smith, Jr., 17 years of age at the time, claimed to have been visited by an angel named Moroni on a hill near his home in Manchester, New York. Upon this hill Cumorah, the alleged angel directed Joseph to the location of a buried stone box that was purported to contain a book written upon golden plates, giving an account of the former inhabitants of this continent and the sources from which they sprang. According to Joseph Smith, the angel Moroni said the fullness of the everlasting gospel was contained on these golden plates as delivered by the Savior to the ancient inhabitants. The Golden Bible, as it was later referred to, was said to be written in an ancient Reformed Egyptian language. Joseph claimed that in addition to the golden plates, there were 2 stones in silver bows fastened to a breastplate, constituted what is called the Urim and the Thummim. The stones were peep stones, or seers, purported to be used in ancient or former times, which God had prepared for the purpose of translating the Reformed Egyptian writing into English. Joseph said the angel Moroni prevented him from taking the plates, but instructed him to return to the same location in a year. On December 2nd, 1823, in a speech before Congress, President James Monroe announced the Monroe Doctrine, which stated the policy that European intervention any place in the Americas was opposed, and that he would establish American neutrality in future European wars. On March 11th, 1824, the Bureau of Indian Affairs was established by the United States War Department, and charged with regulating trade with the Indian tribes. On April 17, 1824, a frontier treaty between the United States and Russia was signed, negotiated by John Quincy Adams, the Secretary of State under President James Monroe. Russia agreed to set its southern border at 54 degrees 40 minutes and allow U.S. ships within the 100-mile limit of its Pacific territories. On December 2, 1824, when the Electoral College vote yielded no majority, John Quincy Adams was elected president by the House of Representatives on February 9, 1825, outpolling fellow Democrat-Republicans, then a loose coalition of competing factions, including Andrew Jackson, who had actually received a higher number of Electoral College votes than Adams, 99 to 84, respectively. It was not a majority due to votes for Henry Clay, 37, and William Crawford, 41. In the first election with popular vote totals, Adams garnered less votes there as well, with 105,321 to 155,872, to Jackson. On February 12, 1825, in the state of Georgia, the Creek Indian tribe gave up their last lands to the United States government, leading to their move west. On March 4, 1825, John Quincy Adams was inaugurated as the 6th president, with John C. Calhoun as his vice president, after the House of Representatives settled the lack of an electoral college majority. By early spring 1825, my second great-grandfather, Richard Montgomery Mann, was living in Sandusky, Ohio. On April 17, 1825, Richard married Delana Bennett. If you recall, Richard's older brother John married Eunice Bennett. Eunice is the younger sister of Delana. Like his older brother, Richard also married his first cousin. I know what you may be thinking, so allow me to share a few facts. First, I did not descend from Delana Bennett. Though Richard Mann is my second great-grandfather, my existence resulted from the union with his second wife, Harriet Taylor, a woman who immigrated from England in the 1840s. Second, and this still leaves me scratching my head, Richard's older brother John and his wife, Eunice Bennett, had several children, none of whom were born with a hoof, a gill, a third eye, or an extra finger or toe. Based on the only photograph I have of John's children, which we will share in Episode 8, they all looked normal. The story passed down for generations about Richard's and Delana's marriage in 1825 was that Delana died of typhoid fever about a year after they were married. However, during my research many years ago, I discovered, as you will see in Episode 7, an 1850 and 1851 census listing both Richard and Delana, evidence that Delana lived well past 1826. Then, about 10 years ago, I found confirmative evidence that Delana passed away in late 1851. This too will be shared in Episode 7. On July 1, 1825, in present-day Sweetwater County, Wyoming, the first Rocky Mountain Rendezvous took place just north of McKinnon along the Henry's Fork River, about 40 miles southeast of Fort Bridger. Members of William Henry Ashley's expedition, Ashley's 100, converged on this site along with traders and trappers throughout the Rocky Mountain region to trade and exchange goods. Among them was the well-known trapper Jedediah Smith, who later became Ashley's partner in the fur trade. On October 26, 1825, use of the Erie Canal began in Buffalo, New York, with the first boat departing from New York City. This opened up the Great Lakes region by cutting the travel time between the two cities 1/3 and shipping costs 9/10. Cost of the canal was $7 million. On November 4, 1825, the first boat navigating the Erie Canal arrived in New York City. The opening of the canal contributed to making the city of New York a chief Atlantic port. The second Rocky Mountain Rendezvous took place during the summer of 1826 in Cache Valley, either near present-day Cove or Hiram, Utah. At the conclusion of the rendezvous, William Henry Ashley met with Jedediah Smith, David Jackson, for whom Jackson Hole, Wyoming is named, and William Sublette on Bear River between present-day Georgetown and Soda Springs, Idaho. Ashley agreed to sell his interest in the fur trade company to Smith, Jackson, and Sublette, forming what would be called the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. On July 4th, Independence Day, 1826, 50 years after the birth of the nation, two founding members of the United States passed away: Thomas Jefferson, our third president, and John Adams, the nation's second president. On October 26, 1826, Kit Carson, mountain man of the western lands, was wanted in Franklin, Missouri after running away to join a trading party at the age of 16. A reward of 1 cent was offered for his return to his bondage to learn the saddler's trade in Franklin. On December 21, 1826, a group of Texas settlers made their first attempt to secede from Mexico in the Fredonian Republic. The secession lasted for about 1 month and caused the Mexican government to curb immigration from the United States and increased dissatisfaction that led to the eventual Texas Revolution. On February 26, 1827, the U.S. Senate ratified the Treaty of Limits that established the Sabine River as the Mexican and United States border, in agreement with the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. The treaty would go into effect on January 12, 1828. On February 28, 1827, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad is incorporated and would become the first railroad in the United States to offer transportation for people and commercial goods. On July 4, 1827, slavery was legally abolished in the state of New York. Joseph Smith, Jr. claimed that when he was first visited by the angel Moroni in September 1823, he was instructed to return to Hill Cumorah every year on September 22nd to receive further instructions pertaining to the golden plates. On September 22nd, 1827, at the age of 21, Joseph claimed the angel Moroni appeared to him once again and allowed him to take physical possession of the golden plates and, according to Smith, a pair of large spectacles he called the Urim and the Thummim, or interpreters, with lenses consisting of 2 seer stones. It was said that Joseph put the plates in a locked chest and hid them in his parents' home in Manchester, New York. According to Joseph, as commanded by the angel Moroni, he refused to allow anyone to view the plates or the other artifacts he claimed to possess. Joseph claimed the plates were engraved in an unknown Reformed Egyptian language and that he was the only person capable of reading and translating the text. In October 1827, Joseph and his wife Emma moved to Harmony, Pennsylvania, where, with financial assistance from Martin Harris, a prominent though superstitious Palmyra landowner, translation of the golden plates commenced. The translation occurred in 2 phases. The first, from December 1827 to June 1828, during which time Joseph transcribed some of the characters and then dictated 116 manuscript pages to Harris, which were later lost. The second phase began in spurts in early 1829 and then in earnest in April 1829 with the arrival of Oliver Cowdery, a schoolteacher who volunteered to serve as Joseph's full-time scribe. Smith dictated the words to Cowdery while peering into seer stones he placed inside a hat. Joseph's translation did not require the use of the golden plates themselves, and he did not speak a lot about the actual translation process. His friends and family stated that as he looked into the seer stones, the written translation of the ancient script appeared to him in English. On October 28, 1828, opposing the Tariff of Abominations, the state of South Carolina began the process of a formal nullification campaign, declaring the right of state nullification of federal laws. On December 2, 1828, after a tumultuous 4 years of national politics, the election for president resulted in a popular and electoral college vote victory of 178 to 83 for Andrew Jackson over sitting president John Quincy Adams. On March 4, 1829, Andrew Jackson, now in the Democratic Party, is inaugurated as the 7th President of the United States, replacing John Quincy Adams after his sole term in office. On June 27, 1829, the Smithsonian Institution is founded when British scientist James Smithson bequeathed £100,000, $500,000 from his estate for its initial funding, on the condition that his nephew have no heirs. The establishment of the Smithsonian was passed by an act of Congress years later in 1846. By 1830, 2 more states were added to the Union. On March 15, 1820, Maine became the 23rd state, and on August 10, 1821, Missouri was admitted to the Union as the 24th state under the ratified Missouri Compromise legislation. This concludes Episode 4, 1820 to 1830, of the Mann and Perrin families of Western Iowa Ancestry video series. In a couple more episodes, we will begin sharing much more information about our families that we are certain will interest you. We hope you are enjoying the video series, and we would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or bits and pieces of information you'd like to share, to fill in some of the gaps. We've included our email address in the description below. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on that notifications button to be notified when new episodes are published. Stay tuned for Episode 5, 1830 to 1840. We'll be publishing that episode as soon as possible. With that, kind regards and thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.